We do have a quorum, so we're good to go. Item 1 on the agenda is consideration of the minutes held on February the 9th, 2024. Chair notes that the agenda item 1 is consideration of these minutes, and that I'll entertain a motion regarding the minutes.
We adopt the minutes. Second.
All right, second. Any discussion? Okay, no discussion. Call for the question. All in favor of adopting the minutes? Raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 2, report from the director. Lance.
Good morning, all, and good morning to all who are in attendance at this 4th meeting of the Alabama Environmental Management Commission for FY 2024. Today's report, as has been done for a number of years, will focus on the latest publicly available EPA-generated compliance and enforcement metrics that compare the department's performance against the rest of the states in the nation. This is one of the methods we use to analyze and optimize our performance. Next, you'll see some photos from the ribbon cutting at the new coastal office in Mobile that is now in full operation. And finally, I'll report on several personnel matters. Analyzing the rates of compliance with permits and the rate of necessary enforcement actions for our regulated industries in Alabama compared to the rest of the nation is an important way that we measure our performance. This EPA-provided analysis examines the air, NPDES, drinking water, and hazardous waste programs. The tool uses standard quantifiable metrics that allow for state-to-state comparisons and the development of national averages. As you may recall from years past, the format for reviewing each program metrics is to look at the size of the universe of the regulated facilities, then to compare the rate of inspections, informal enforcement actions, and significant noncompliance to the rest of the nation. This format was chosen to highlight that our objective is for regulated facilities to comply with the requirements of environmental permits and regulations issued by the department. By looking at non-compliance metrics, we are in effect looking at compliance. When we speak of compliance and enforcement, we're referring to the compliance with permits developed by the department in accord with carefully developed environmental standards and enforcement actions when conditions in those permits and regulations are not met. Now, to the dashboard slides that analyze compliance with and enforcement of environmental permit requirements. As we begin, let me note that this presentation will have essentially the same information as the graphs that appear at the end of the ADEM update memorandum you receive before each commission meeting. However, the graphs in the update memorandum are as they appear on the EPA website, and they do not use a common format. So we have restructured them to be in a common format for this report. To help identify the program that is the subject of the graph, each individual graph, we will be using a color code where blue is air, green is water, orange is drinking water, and brown is land. First, we will look at the size of the regulated universe over time for each of the 4 program areas. In Alabama, 2 local air programs were grandfathered as standalone entities when the Clean Air Act became law in 1970. They operate independently of the ADEM state program, although ADEM does provide substantial technical and other assistance to them. The universe of regulated air facilities under the ADEM program is down from 561 to 527 between 2015 and 2023, about a 6% drop. The slowly declining trend continued in 2023 with 22 and other facilities. Their in the water media facilities was generally 2020. Increasing trend increase of more than 1,000 or nearly 9%. There are now more than 12,000 regulated facilities. That rapid increase in 23 is a result of increased construction activity requiring increased construction stormwater permits. Since construction is cyclical, the increase may be temporary. In drinking water, the universe has been on a slow decline from 590 in 2015 to 571 in 2023, about a 3.2% decrease. The decline is due to the closing of several transient systems, several water systems. 71 is a relatively small number of drinking water systems. In the case of drinking water, the smaller number of facilities that are of larger size is beneficial because larger facilities have improved access to management and other resources. The universe of hazardous waste facilities steadily increased from 5,060 in 2015 to about 5,400 in 2023. The nearly 7% increase is attributable in large part to a 2019 National Enforcement Settlement Agreement that caused pharmacies and other retail facilities selling pharmaceuticals to report as hazardous waste generators. To recap, the universe of permitted facilities for air and drinking water are slowly declining, while the universe of permitted facilities for water and hazardous waste are slowly increasing. Next is inspections. Results show that inspecting is the most important tool to obtain compliance with environmental permits and requirements in Alabama. The following graphs will show inspection rates for each of the 4 media. The different programs have different names for the inspection activities, such as full compliance evaluation, or facilities inspected, or site visits, or inspection coverage, due to the slightly different terminology used in the various federal enabling statutes. The graphs will use the term inspections for all media. The blue bars represent the inspection rate of all facilities during the last 9 years for the department's AIR program. The dashed red line represents the average inspection rate for the nation. As you can see, Alabama continues to have an inspection rate that is nearly 4 times the national average, and apart from 2020, a COVID year, shows a slowly increasing trend slightly over 98%. I would note that the national trend is declining slightly, while ADEM's trend is slowly increasing. The green bars for the water program, although declining in recent years, consistently show an inspection rate for all facilities that is nearly 2.5 times better than the national average shown by the red dashed line. The orange bars for the drinking water program show an inspection rate of more than 99% for all regulated facilities, making it about 3 times the national average shown by the red dashed line. Closing out inspections, the brown bars for the hazardous waste program show a rate for all inspections that is 2 to 3 times the national average. As far as inspections are concerned, all media have inspection rates that are 2 to 4 times the national average, which shows the importance we place on inspections as a tool to achieve compliance. The enforcement group of graphs highlights the second most important element after inspections in our strategy to achieve compliance. It has been our strategy to utilize education, including informal enforcement, to obtain a higher level of compliance. Research has shown that inspections and technical assistance, which is education, are the biggest contributors to compliance. Most violations are not intentional. They are many times the result of either not knowing what is required under the permits, accidents, or mistakes. Informal enforcement is one form of education that helps avoid those situations. As noted in the past, informal enforcement is also a more cost-effective alternative without sacrificing compliance results. EPA enforcement data was used to create the following graphs showing the relationship between informal and formal enforcement actions. In this AIR program graph, the blue columns represent the percentage of all enforcement actions that are informal, and the dashed red line represents the average percentage for the nation. As you can see, except for 2022, ADEM consistently has a higher rate of informal enforcement than the rest of the nation. Both the department and the national trend lines are essentially flat. In the water program, the percentage of informal actions is again higher than the national average, represented by the red dashed line. Our trend is essentially flat at around 95%. The rest of the nation is closing in on us with a rate approaching 85%. Of course, some formal enforcement will always be required, so we are not likely to go beyond our 95% level. As you can see, in this graph, both ADEM and the rest of the nation have very high rates of informal enforcement. The informal enforcement trend for our drinking water program is flat and peaked out at a rate above the dashed red line representing the national average that is also essentially flat. Hazardous waste, like other ADEM programs, shows a higher rate of informal enforcement that yields high levels of compliance. This program has employed a rate of informal enforcement that is similar to that of other ADEM programs and is on par with the national average. We will continue to apply emphasis on informal enforcement and outreach to hazardous waste facilities to enhance the compliance rates in our hazardous waste program. Overall, ADEM has high rates of informal enforcement, and the rest of the nation is approaching similar levels. This final group of dashboard slides will look at the rates of significant noncompliance, commonly referred to as SNC, SNC. The different programs use different terminology, such as high priority violations or priority enforcement systems, to describe this type of noncompliance. However, for ease of presentation, we will use the term SNC to identify all violations that are of a more serious nature and thus are a cause for heightened concern. The objective of all environmental programs is to have a low noncompliance rate, which is synonymous with a high compliance rate. This group of slides, graphs, is where we'll see if our strategy of high rates of inspections and informal enforcement is showing results. Beginning with air, the blue bars represent the percentage of inspections that result in a significant noncompliance or SNC finding for Alabama facilities, and the dashed red line represents the national average. Both the department and the rest of the nation have very low rates of significant noncompliance in air. These are the lowest of any media. The SNC rate for Alabama is typically about 1.5%, which is about 2/3 of the national average. The water program has a SNC rate as a percentage of inspections conducted that is exceptionally low compared to the rest of the nation. The rate is about 1/4 the national average and continues to trend favorable. The drinking water program has a SNC rate of about 1/6 the national average, the dashed red line. The slight increase in 2022 is attributable to several systems that had a temporary issue with controlling disinfectant byproducts that occur when disinfectants used to treat the water react with naturally occurring organic material during distribution of the water. As you see, the hazardous waste program is the one area where we are above the national average in the percentage of inspections showing incidents of significant noncompliance, and we want to be below the national average. The hazardous waste program primarily focuses on the management of hazardous waste handling sites, the implementation of measures to prevent new hazardous material releases, and the remediation of past hazardous material releases. For decades, we have had no substantial new hazardous waste sites created in Alabama that require cleanup, and many legacy sites have been cleaned up. However, in the hazardous waste program, incidents of noncompliance classified as significant do occur. Incidents of significant noncompliance typically involve exceeding the maximum number of days hazardous waste can be stored at a location and or repeated occurrence of minor violations such as poor record keeping and labeling. At 8.3%, this year's percentage rate shows a slight decrease over last year's 9.3% rate, while the national average is up slightly, but we are not where we want to be. 8.3% represents 12 facilities in significant noncompliance out of a universe of 145 large facilities inspected. More importantly, none of the SNCs identified have been found to result in harm to human health or the environment. EPA has reviewed some indications that SNC reporting protocols are not consistent among states, which may skew national comparisons, but has not yet been able to pinpoint any reason for the elevated SNC level at the department. In fact, the most recent review of our RCRA program was very complimentary, especially for having met all work plan requirements. Nevertheless, the Land Division efforts to reduce hazardous waste SNC rate in the future will continue through a stepped-up targeted education program, including video format instruction on the most common violations and how to avoid them. The program will also provide one-on-one training sessions with the treatment, storage, and disposal facilities, which are the largest hazardous waste handlers, as well as joint sessions with their customers that represent the next largest handlers. We will continue to address all violations with appropriate enforcement actions. So, with the exception of hazardous waste, the significant noncompliance rates in Alabama are significantly lower than the rest of the nation. Summarize, the number of regulated facilities in Alabama is generally steady, with slight increases in the water and hazardous waste media and slight decreases in the air and drinking water media. High inspection rates are being implemented across all programs. The department emphasizes informal enforcement, a form of education. Alabama has very low rates of significant noncompliance compared to the rest of the nation in the air, water, and drinking water programs. An enhanced inspection and instructional program for facilities covered by the hazardous waste program is being implemented to reduce the rate of significant noncompliance. And overall, the department outperforms the rest of the nation in compliance and enforcement, with long-term trends in key metrics that are generally favorable. These metrics are consistent with the trends in non-statistical environmental quality measures over many years, highlighted in my periodic reports on how the the state of the environment in Alabama. They are also consistent with EPA-regulated industry and independent research groups' findings that Alabama is one of the top environmental performers in the nation. While the state overall has an enviable environmental record, there are occasionally serious environmental issues that can and do cause great concern in local communities. Typically, each year there are several. This year, heavy rains have caused concern with local sanitary sewer overflows. Aging individual and public wastewater handling systems have been a matter of heightened concern, as well as concerns with per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. We address these through various funding programs or regulatory and enforcement actions and cover them in my reports to you or in the news releases. Next, I am pleased that with the exception of when I report on the sale of the old Perimeter Road facility, this will be the final report on the new coastal office that has been in the planning, funding, design, and construction process for 13 years. You see in this photo, the ribbon cutting ceremony that took place on March the 28th. There were more than 100 guests, including a representative for Governor Ivey, area mayors, individuals representing Alabama U.S. Senate and House members, Chair of the Mobile County Commission, Director of the Federal Restore Council, representatives from numerous federal and state agencies and environmental organizations, not to mention commission members. In this photo, you can see Commissioner Mary Merritt on the left, Dr. Patrick in the center front, and Chair Frank McFadden to the right in the front. I can't quite pick out Commissioner Kevin McKinstry, who is back in the crowd somewhere. Can you find yourself in that photo?
Oh, no.
Okay, all right.
I'm in there, though.
It's not just me.
I'm in there.
Okay, he is in there, he is in there. Here you see the actual ribbon cutting with left to right, Tim Harrison, president of Harrison Construction, the builder, Amy Hunter with the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Sandy Stimson, mayor of Mobile, Jeff Collier, mayor of Dalton Island, John Baker, president of Thompson Engineering, the parent of the architectural firm Watermark, the designer of the building, yours truly, Henry Barnes, mayor of Biola Battery. You can see the top of the head of Merceria Ludgood, chair of the Mobile County Commission, our own Marilyn Elliott, and Mary Walker, director of the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council, the major provider of the funding to build the facility. As noted at the ribbon cutting, the facility has a number of environmentally friendly features, including rubber-modified asphalt paving, rainwater retention to recharge groundwater, electric vehicle charging stations, recycled scrap tire material for the walking track, preservation of mature trees on the site, plantings of native trees, bushes, and grasses, extensive use of natural light in both the office and laboratory areas, and LED lighting throughout. As is our practice, when personnel achieve a significant milestone in their professional development, they are recognized for that achievement. This is an important element in our strategic and operating plans to encourage professional development. Today, I'm pleased to recognize 3 individuals who have completed the rigorous process of education, work experience, and testing to earn the designation of professional engineer. Ricky Miner in our land division, would you please stand? Robert Compton earned his PE in 2022, but we missed introducing him, so belatedly, please stand and be recognized. Scott Jackson in our water division is out of the country, so we will recognize him at a future meeting. Congratulations. These are the future leaders of ADEM. I also want to note some recent changes among our more seasoned personnel. When I came to the department nearly 14 years ago, Marilyn Elliott had already been with the department for more than 30 years, with more than 10 of those serving as deputy director. Now, after more than 45 years of service, including 25 as deputy director, as of March 1st, Marilyn assumed the position of senior advisor in order to facilitate a smooth transition to a new deputy director. Without question, Marilyn has contributed more to the significant successes of the department than any other individual. On a personal note, she guided me through the process of environmental regulation. She consistently met or exceeded my every expectation. She plans to retire on December 31, 24, when she has completed her final assignment of leaving the department in the hands of a well-mentored new deputy director. Marilyn, would you please stand and receive our hard. That's going to be a hard record to beat. Very hard record to beat. Our new deputy director is Jeffrey Kitchens, who has been with the department 30 years, having served in the air, land, and water divisions. For the last 12 years, he has been in our water division, most recently serving as the water division chief. You may well recognize Jeff, since he has from time to time made presentations before the commission. Jeff, would you stand and be recognized? He's got big shoes to fill, but he's got big feet. And replacing Jeff as the water division chief is Daphne Lutz, who has also been with the department for 30 years, including 17 years in the water division, most recently as chief of the industrial and municipal branch. Daphne, would you please stand? So with that, that concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Sounds like we're doing well.
Well,
And I'm glad you did take the pictures of the lunch at the coastal office opening, so
I know
that would
better
not,
than
that would be a little,
yeah, I know better than that.
but it is a very nice office, and thanks for all the hard work, Lance. It took a long time to get that done, and Marilyn and I both were working here back in the early days of this agency when we would have died and gone to heaven to have had a facility like that to operate it. Of course, all the new technology makes it automation better, precision, accuracy better, and all. So anyway, great job on that, Lance. And I don't know if it's proper to get a motion to have a in that building, because it's 3 miles from my office, and it probably would not go with the Ethics Commission, so we won't do that.
Well, the commission members are invited to visit the office at
Yeah.
any time. Most of y'all have had an opportunity, and you have not. But,
And it's in a
very
nice,
fun.
yeah, it's in a nice area. It's right next to the Coast Guard base on the bay, wetlands right behind it. I mean, and it's all open. Watermark did a great job with the architecture to have that. I mean, it's like you get up wanting to go to work in that office, no matter what you're doing. You know, it's just a great place to work. So that's great for retention, for recruitment and retention also. So side benefits of some of that, not just being a pretty building. So thanks for the good work on that. And Marilyn, thanks for a lot of good hard work over the years. And you're not going to be too far, because I know you live here in Montgomery. So I may have to drag you back over here and get Jeff out of the ditch occasionally when he get. And Jeff, thank you for stepping up and willing to take that. I know you're going to do a great job. And Daphne, who we've worked with for a number of years, and a great choice to come in behind you. So great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's item 2. Item 3, report from the commission chair. I have no report today. And so we'll go to item 4, which is the National Salvage and Service Corporation is a petitioner versus ADEM, the respondent. It's EMC docket number 22-04. in reference to ADEM Administrative Order 22-079-AP, issued on May 18th, 2022 to National Salvage and Service Corporation, Selma, Dallas County, Alabama. We'll refer to this today as National Salvage or the petitioner, so that's who it is. And they are appealing an administrative order decision. So I'll note that this item on the agenda before the commission is objections to the recommendation of the hearing officer in request for oral argument, the petitioner's proposed order, ADEM's reply to petitioner's objections to recommendation of the hearing officer, and the department's proposed order to the hearing officer's recommendations. If you don't remember all that, see me after the meeting. That's a mouthful. Chair also notes that the hearing officer, with supporting findings of fact and conclusions of law, recommends that the commission sustain the department's findings and approve its actions in administrative order number 22-079-AP, issued to National Salvage and Service Corporation. Secondly, the petitioner proposes that the commission adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law set forth in the petitioner's proposed order and find that the petitioner did not violate ADEM's open burning regulations when lightning ignited a fire at the facility on August 1st, 2021, and disapprove ADEM Administrative Order number 22-079-AP. And lastly, ADEM proposes that the commission adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the hearing officer to the Environmental Management Commission and reject the petitioner's proposed order. So I'll note first that we will entertain a motion from the commission regarding the petitioner's request for oral arguments, adding that the commission may want to include in the motion a set time to be allotted for each party in the oral argument. So we do have petitioner's counsel here, a representative. Okay, we do have, and we do have the department's representative on that, attorney also. So what's the delight of the commission?
Move to grant the request for oral argument, and without time limits, they can talk too long and hang themselves if they want to.
Second that motion.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on the motion? I would add, do we want to give it an open-ended timeline, Lanier, or set it to?
Since you are presiding over these proceedings, you can cut them off at any time.
Let's try to stay within 10 minutes if we can do that. So, all right, so any more discussion? Anybody else have any ideas on that? Okay, all right, call for the question. All those in favor of allowing oral arguments for as reasonable time as we can to be about 10 minutes, raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Got to sign that before we can talk. Okay. Yeah, just a point of order, the petitioner's attorney will go first in this, followed by respondents or ADEM's attorney. We're all good, Debbie, with that? Okay. Okay, we'll let the petitioner's attorney go first. Please identify yourself.
My name is Grace Hembry. I'm with Balch and Bingham, and we represent petitioner National Salvage in this case. Thank you for granting our motion, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and I promise I will keep this under 10 minutes. As you know, this matter involves a large fire that was ignited by lightning when it struck a pile of railroad ties at National's Selma facility. The issue on appeal before the hearing officer was whether National ignited that fire. The Commission should not adopt the hearing officer's recommendations for two main reasons. First, the administrative order should not be upheld because National did not ignite the fire. Lightning is what caused the fire. Second, the civil penalty imposed in the administrative order is unduly punitive and unreasonable. We are asking the Commission to disapprove the administrative order. First, the Commission should disapprove the administrative order because National did not ignite the fire. The Department, the hearing officer, and National all agree that lightning started the fire. That fact alone is dispositive here. As the Commission knows, ADEM's open burning regulations prohibit a person from igniting, causing to be ignited, permitting to be ignited, or maintaining an open fire. In the administrative order, ADEM only charged National with permitting railroad ties to be ignited. ADEM did not make any finding that National violated the regulations by maintaining a fire. Those prohibitions on permitting a fire and maintaining a fire are two distinct prohibitions in the regulations. The hearing officer's job was to determine whether the evidence presented at the hearing supported the violations outlined in the administrative order. Because the hearing officer found that National maintained the fire, instead of finding that National ignited the fire, the hearing officer's recommendation should not stand. The hearing officer's recommendation to uphold the administrative order was based entirely on this finding that National maintains the fire. Even if ADEM had put the word maintain in the order, there is no evidence to support the conclusion that National maintained the fire. The hearing officer pointed to National storage practices and found that National's failure to follow its self-imposed storage practices was evidence that National maintained the fire. However, the hearing officer did not make a finding that the storage practices were improper, and this is understandable because the evidence showed that National storage practices at the time of the fire were consistent with industry standards and did not violate any fire codes. Most notably, though, is that the Department's open burning regulations do not establish storage practices or adjust general fire prevention. In fact, as the Department has admitted, it does not have the authority to establish or enforce fire prevention standards. The state legislature has granted the state fire marshal the exclusive authority over fire prevention in the state of Alabama. The Department has mentioned, as you've read, that there is legal precedence allowing it to enforce violations of the open burning regulations based on improper storage practices. But that is not what those cases say. The first case that ADEM relies on is not controlling here because that case is based on an Illinois law that is not the same as ADEM's open burning regulations and is more broad than ADEM's regulations. The second case that ADEM relies on in its response to National's objections is a case that involved ADEM's open burning regulations. However, that case is not helpful either because in that case, the fire's ignition was directly due to the storage practices that the owner put in place. The owner's actions in that case violated the regulations because those actions caused the material to ignite through spontaneous combustion. A lightning strike is not analogous to material that is ignited through spontaneous combustion, so the second case that ADEM points you to does not set a precedent here. And evidence at the hearing established that spontaneous combustion was not a factor in this fire. The second reason the commission should not accept the hearing officer's recommendation is because the penalty imposed is unreasonable and grossly disproportionate to the penalties imposed by the department for other open burning violations. The hearing officer's recommendation errs by applying the wrong standard of review when analyzing ADEM's penalty calculations in this case. The rules of procedure set forth in Division 335-2 of ADEM's Administrative Code require the hearing to be conducted as a de novo proceeding. As you know, de novo review is review without assumptions of correctness. Instead of applying that standard, the hearing officer said that he deferred to ADEM's penalty calculation. ADEM would have you believe that the hearing officer simply stated his personal beliefs about the department's penalty calculation. However, the hearing officer also stated that he was not in a position to say that the department erred. But that is the exact position that the hearing officer is supposed to be in when reviewing the penalty amount under a de novo standard. In fact, ADEM's regulations expressly grant the commission authority to decrease a penalty based on evidence presented at the hearing. In his analysis, the hearing officer considered each of the penalty factors that is set forth in the Alabama Code. The hearing officer stated that the department's penalty calculation was somewhat disjointed in this case. The hearing officer went on to correctly note that the 3 violations listed in the penalty calculation sheet were based on 3 separate violations of 3 separate sections of the regulations. However, without explanation, the hearing officer simply deferred to ADEM's post hoc argument that the 3 violations listed in the penalty calculation sheet were actually based on 3 arbitrary days that the fire burned. Even if ADEM had properly issued the civil penalty based on 3 days that the fire burned, the penalty amount imposed here far exceeds the penalties imposed for other violations of the open burning regulations. In this case, ADEM imposed the maximum possible statutory penalty. However, National presented evidence at the hearing showing the civil penalties imposed for other violations of the open burning regulations were significantly lower than the penalty imposed here. Here, ADEM's imposing a civil penalty of $75,000, but in other orders discussed during the hearing, ADEM never imposed a civil penalty for more than $6,000. As ADEM admitted, the department is required to treat similar cases similarly when taking enforcement actions and to issue civil penalties objectively and consistently. The imposition of a penalty that is 25 times higher than some penalties issued for other similar violations certainly does not show that the department is treating this case in a similar manner as it has other cases. In fact, most of the other civil penalties discussed during the hearing were imposed to people who intentionally ignited fire. National did not intentionally set this fire. It was caused by lightning. The hearing officer's recommendation noted that there was no evidence of any irreparable harm to the environment or measurable threat to public health or safety. He also noted that National fully cooperated with emergency responders and made efforts to minimize the effects to the environment. Therefore, National's conduct does not justify a civil penalty of $75,000. ADEM failed to meet its burden to justify why it treated National differently when issuing this civil penalty. And the hearing officer's recommendation did not address at all the fact that ADEM failed to meet this burden. Therefore, we are asking the Commission to step in and apply reason and consistency in this matter. We are asking the Commission to disapprove the administrative order in full. But if the Commission upholds the order, we ask that you lower the penalty amount so that it is consistent with other penalties issued for other violations of the open burning regulations. As discussed in the hearing officer's recommendation, National cooperated with all state agencies to mitigate the effects of the fire, and National suffered greatly when the fire destroyed the railroad tie inventory. The financial impact of the fire is still affecting National, so National may not have the ability to pay the civil penalty in the near future if the civil penalty is not lowered. That was a lot of information, and I know that we had a lot of filings, so I'm happy to answer any questions that I didn't cover in my presentation.
You mentioned the fine was 25 times higher than the $6,000. Was that?
No,
what
not
we-
the
Did I
no.
misunderstood that? Misunderstand that?
Yes, I'm sorry. So it is 25 times higher than some of the penalties. 6,000 was just the highest penalty that we identified that had been issued, but there are some that were 25 times lower for similar violations to this one. And those are laid out in our post-hearing brief. There's examples of all of those cases that we've located, showing examples of the penalty amounts.
Now, with the excessive inventory coming into the facility, it seemed like it was, normally you keep 50 bundles, and it was like 400 bundles or something, up to 2 million railroad ties that were coming in, and yet your outgo of that to the paper mill, I think, is one of your major sources. Some was going to South America, and some to maybe Lowe's and Home Depot if they're good, or whatever, wherever they were going. Why was that not cut off if you were having that supply chain issue, which is recognizable during that time of COVID, and continue to pull that material in?
Right, so they had a contract that they had to uphold, but they were taking measures to divert some of that inventory that was coming in. They were sending it to other facilities, and that's part of the reason that they acquired that client in South America, was to get some of the inventory off-site. And it was a large amount of inventory that was higher than usual, but like I mentioned, they were still maintaining the inventory that they had in a manner that was in line with, and in some cases, better than the general industry standards that are in place for storing this type of material.
That question, Lanier?
Yes. You mentioned the state fire marshal has responsibility to set, or the authority to set, storage, outside storage regulations. Was there any regulation that applied to this site that was violated?
Not that we have identified. There are fire codes that the state fire marshal has adopted, but we were not able to identify any of those that were violated because of our storage practices.
That would apply to how you store these items outside?
Yes, how to store used railroad ties outdoors.
National Fire Protection Association, if I'm saying that right, has guidelines for that. I don't know if it's applicable, that they are required, or if it's just guidance documents or whatever.
Well, it's not regulation.
It's not regulation, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
But as I understand it, the primary objection that National Salvage has is that obviously they didn't ignite the fire, maintain, or permit the fire. That's your main position.
Well, our main position is that we did not permit the fire to be ignited. The administrative order only alleges that we permitted the fire to be ignited. It does not allege that we maintained the fire or caused the fire or ignited it. So our position is that we did not violate the what is set forth in the administrative order. If ADEM wanted to claim that we violated the burning regulations by maintaining the fire, they would have to issue another proposed order that provided notification of that violation.
Anyone else have any questions for Ms. Hembry? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hembry. Appreciate your coming. So now we'll hear from the hearing officer.
I'm not the hearing officer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm an attorney that represents the department.
Okay, all right.
I'm James Thrash,
For the respondent then.
the respondent, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you this morning. And I just want to let everyone know that here in this very room, the hearing officer heard about 8 hours worth of testimony on the day of the hearing. He had the opportunity to listen to every witness, ask questions, and reviewed over 60 exhibits, reviewed our all the parties' briefs, and he wrote his recommendation. And we are here to encourage the commission to adopt the recommendation of the commission. I'm the hearing officer. First of all, National said that they did not ignite the fire at the cross-tie yard. And Ron Gore, the chief of the air division, he testified to that very point. And he said that it's not relevant that the fire was started by lightning because National was not being penalized for that initial first pile of cross ties that caught on fire, but they were being penalized for the entire yard full of cross ties that caught on fire over the next 2 to 3 days. And that's relevant for several reasons, and because that goes back to their storage practices. And in this particular case, National had a storage practice where they kept 10,000 cross ties to a pile, and those piles were separated by 300 feet. And beginning in 2019, prior to COVID, their inventory began to increase substantially. Historically, they kept 400,000 to 500,000 cross ties on that yard, and at the time of the fire, there were 2.1 million cross ties on that yard, and the spacing between those piles had gone from 300 feet down to 15 to 30 feet. And as a result, National had created piles of cross ties that were susceptible to a fire spreading or jumping from pile to pile because of their management practices with their cross tie inventory. And that's what this case is all about, is all of those cross ties burning. If had just that one pile that got struck and ignited by lightning burned and went out, we wouldn't be here today. But it's because of those other 2 million. They made all their expanded, went from 4 to 5 ties, which was a 400% to 500% increase in inventory on their lot, and as a result, they filled in the fire break and the rows. They extended all their rows. They placed cross ties on the edge of the woods, and they placed cross ties along the side of the railroad track. There was cross ties everywhere out there on that yard, and once they got started, and they knew that a cross tie was a good alternative fuel because cross ties burn very hot. They have a higher BTU than normal wood. And once they got started, the fire department couldn't put them out because, first of all, they didn't have enough room to work in because the fire breaks had been, decreased by 90%. They've gone from 300 feet to 30 feet. And so I think it is their storage practices that caused all of this, and that's what we're here talking about today. And then if we want to address the civil penalty in this case, I want to point out to you a little testimony that Mr. Gore gave concerning the pollutants that were emitted into the air. He testified that based on some calculations he made, and he was cross-examined by all the attorneys, it says there were 2,400 tons of fine particulate matter emitted into the air, 11,500 tons of carbon monoxide, 400 tons of nitrogen oxide, all emitted into the air. And by definition, smoke is air pollutant. And we're not talking about some tree trimming service or a small fire like that. We're talking about 2.1 million cross ties that burned and emitted those substantial amounts of pollutants into the atmosphere. There is no other similar case to this that's been addressed in Alabama, because this is a substantial amount of pollutants. And there's never been a case similar to it before. Yeah, there's been a lot of smaller fires, but none of this magnitude. And for that reason, we would ask that the commission adopt the hearing officer's order, or his recommendation is the commission's order today. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
What is I guess, you know, I'm the lawyer, so I'm stuck on the words. But what is you know, there was a fire, I understand, but what regulation did they violate?
They violated the open burning statute, which,
In terms of their storage, I guess is,
Well,
the conduct is, what I hear you saying is the piles are too close together.
they violated what is a best management practice or a company practice that they had in effect. And all BMPs are not codified.
Oh, I understand that.
So it's a standard management practice in that industry to space out this type of material. And they had that in effect, but what happened is they would not say no to the railroad continuing to bring ties. So as they got more and more ties, if you go back and read the testimony, they say, we had to adjust our practice. We adjusted and adjusted and adjusted our practices every day, which basically meant they were violating their own practice every day, because a standard, you should make the yard meet the standard that the company has concerning storage practices, not make your standard meet the conditions on the yard. I mean, otherwise, it's not a standard.
But you said this case revolved around the storage factor. Isn't the case really about, boils down to one word, did they maintain the fire in 335-3-3.01? That's why we're here, isn't it?
Well, they maintained the fire because instead of the fire burning to a fire break and going out, it continued to jump like a domino effect across the yard, and they were not able to put it out. They were not able to.
And I think somewhere, hearing officer or one of y'all defined what maintain is from Merriam-Webster's dictionary. And it's, I'm quoting, to keep in an existing state or to continue. So, you know, I'm kind of hung up on that word, because the word's not just a word out of the dictionary, it has to be in context. And if a text is not in context, it's a pretext for whatever you want it to say. It's sort of an old saying. But in this case, you know, I'm just wondering, how were they keeping it in existence or to continue when they were actually out there putting the fire out, helping the first responders put it out? I'm just having trouble with that.
There was never any testimony that they helped first responders put the fire out. There was fire department showed up and tried to put it out, but National Salvage never did.
I read in depositions or in some document that they had their personnel out there in that 2-week period. Now, if I'm wrong,
that was the fire burned for over a month, and they were only penalized for 3 days. Yes, 2 and 3, 4 weeks later, they would go out there with a water truck and put out hot spots daily. But for the 3 days that it was a conflagration out there, they did not try, nor the fire department tried to put the fire out because it was too hot.
I think maintain is something that would, in my mind, be an affirmative act. That, you know, we, by maintaining the fire and continuing to feed the fire, prevent the fire from going out, that's maintain. You know, I maintain my lawn by going out, cutting the grass, weed eating, and doing all of that
You don't have that done?
to keep, yeah.
I thought so.
But, you know, and so I guess that's, for me, you know, to say that they permitted a fire or maintained a fire, I'm just not seeing that, you know, a fire caused by lightning is something that, you know, that they are maintaining. You know, you maintain a fire on the old steam trains by continuing to shovel coal in there.
Well, in this particular case, what happened is their affirmative act was when they created these piles that were too close together and were not sufficiently spread apart so that the fire breaks would work. And basically what they did when they did that, they lit a long fuse on the end of a stick of dynamite, and once that fire got started, it just kept burning every single pile in the entire yard until it burned 2 million cross tiles. So their affirmative act was in creating piles that were susceptible to a fire jumping the fire breaks and spreading instead of burning to the end of the fire break and going out. That was their affirmative conduct in this case.
How much did they expand the yard? You said
They expanded the yard by
16 acres.
approximately 16 acres, which is about a 65% expansion, but they increased their inventory 400 to 500%.
And was that, there was no other footprint left on the yard to expand?
No, sir. In fact, they had run out of room, and they started putting cross ties up and down the railroad and in the edge of the woods.
And do these storage sites are they permitted or in any way? Did they have the option to buy or lease more land to store these extra cross ties on instead of piling it on?
I'm not sure about that, but they certainly had the option to stop taking additional cross ties.
Okay, any other questions? Y'all think of anything else for Mr. Nash? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, we have a couple of options on motions here, so Chair notes that I'll entertain a motion from the commission regarding the recommendation of the hearing officer or the petitioner's proposed order. Do we need to read that proposed order? Or that the, let's see if I have that, I'm not sure. I mean, we have all read it, but I didn't know if we needed to repeat that here or not. Okay. I have it here. Do we want to read the whole thing or just the summary of what they're asking for? Just do the summary. Okay, the summary of the proposed order that the petitioner would like reads as follows. Therefore, the commission hereby orders, adjudges, and decrees as follows. That the findings of fact and conclusions of law set forth in herein are adopted. That National did not violate ADEM's open burning regulations when lightning ignited a fire at the facility on August 1st, 2021, that the commission hereby disapproves final administrative order number 22-079-AP in its entirety, and that this action has been taken and this order shall be deemed rendered effective as of this date as shown. That's the proposed order by the petitioner. And so we can move to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions, and law of recommendations of the hearing officer, or move to adopt the petitioner's proposed order.
I would move to adopt the recommendations of the hearing officer.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to move to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions, law, and recommendations of the hearing officer, and we have a second. Are there any discussions on that? Any further discussion?
I'm still hung up on permit and maintain and how government can impose a penalty for conduct that in and of itself does not violate any government standard. That is the storage facilities, the storage condition.
But they admitted they violated their own practice standards, and they certainly had the option to store off-site somewhere else by leasing some additional property.
I agree, but we enforce government regulations, not their practices, their policies and procedures. That's my issue.
Yeah, I think it does come down to maintain. I think that word, I think that's been key, one of the key facts here. What does that mean? And it's, yeah, several ways to take that. So. Anybody else? We have the motion on the table and seconded. Okay, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of adopting the findings, fact, and conclusions of law and recommendation of the hearing officer, raise your hand. 4. Those opposed? Okay, I believe it passes 4-2. Definitely a tough question. We appreciate the hard work of the hearing officer and the department. I think Lanier here had some good points about that, and we have regulations, and this will get sorted out. So.
You're on your line.
Yeah.
Okay, that's agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 5, other business. Any other business come before the commission? Not. Item number 6, future business sessions. Chair notes the date of the next commission meeting is June 14th, 2024. And do we, is everyone okay with that date? Is that for now? I know our schedule's changed, but, so that looks good. So we do have commissioners available for that date. All right, public comment period. David, do we have anybody signed up to speak? Nobody signed up to speak.
Move to adjourn.
I gotta turn that page first. Turn the page to adjournment, okay.
I've seen it enough.
I know, all right, we have a motion, any a second? Motion, all right, motion and second to adjourn, any discussion? No discussion. All right, all those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. Okay, opposed? Nobody opposed? Thank y'all for coming.